Good morning, Flutarians. Welcome back to another session of the Atomic Flutist. The key of the day today is going to be B major. So grab your fingering chart if you need it, grab your flute, get ready to go. I am naming these sessions the Atomic Flutist based off of the Atomic Habits book by James Clear. And I highly recommend that you check it out or at least listen to a synopsis, maybe from your local library. Another book that I'm rereading or listening to from my local library is Victor Wooten's The Music Lesson. This is a great book, I think, in preparation for many of the topics that we discuss in Flutarians. And in fact, I'm thinking about starting a book club for it because he writes so eloquently many of the things that I think should be or could be discussed with Flutarians and the subject of improvisation. And one of those is this idea of playing and jamming as opposed to practicing. Now, today we will be mostly practicing technique in this little 30-minute session, but we'll also start off with a little bit of playing, and then we'll do more playing later today with improv games. I do improv games 4 times a week. Today at 1 p.m. Central Time, it will be in conjunction with Alexandra Petropoulos's Flute Nerd Lab. It's another flute school on the school platform. And it's a great place to go if you're a flutist who wants to improve your overall technique. I only have so much time to talk about improvisation as well as flute technique. So I try to mix in plenty of good flute technique tips. But for more and for more community, please join us in the Flute Nerd Lab. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of improvisation just on the first 3 notes of B major. I'm going to put a drone tone on. This is the B. So let's keep it simple at first and just improvise on B, C sharp, and D sharp. Remember, improvisation is about way more than just what notes we play. We have all of the other elements of music that we can improvise with too, like, for example, volume or vibrato, rhythm, or groove, you might say. So let's start warming up that lower register with our chromatic scale 2 notes at a time. I will go all the way down to the low B because I have a low B on my flute and it'll sound nice and satisfying to finish the octave. But if you have a low C on your flute, instead, once I'm going down to that low B, why don't you finish it back up at the next B, this B. Now, in my opinion, the low register on the flute is the foundation for a beautiful upper register. So I always warm up my low register first. Also, the low register, I need to have a nice, soft, supple, relaxed bottom lip, relaxed corners of my mouth. And we tend to build more tension to get the higher notes out, especially here. But if we practice the lower notes first, it helps us prevent having too much tension. If you have too much tension in the upper octave, the notes tend to sound pinched as opposed to open. So let's do it like this. B to B flat, then we'll do, take a breath, B flat to A, take a breath, A to A flat. And with each of those pairs of notes, I want you to start and end as quietly as possible and crescendo to as loud as possible. And when you're about halfway through with your air tank, make that your moment to transition to the next note. When we're improvising, we don't have someone, we can't write into the music where to breathe, and we don't have a composer there to have written in a rest for breathing. So we have to develop an awareness of where am I going to take my next breath so that our following phrase can be well supported. So this sort of dynamics, start soft, get loud, end soft. also, we know the flute tends to play sharper when we play louder and play flatter when we play quieter. So that's part of why I have the drone tone on, so we can use that to listen to our intonation and do what we can to compensate for that tendency. Here comes B flat to A. Also, I'm trying to do this with no vibrato, so I can really focus on that intonation. Here comes A to A flat. I'm noticing that my aperture and my embouchure gets wider, more like a pancake shape, when I go lower. So if you're doing this at home and you're cracking up into the next octave as you go lower, go back to the previous pair of notes that you were able to play comfortably without cracking up. Do that one again, and then see after that if you can relax into the next one. I think we're on A flat to G. Welcome, Lauren. This is A flat to G. Let's do that one again, the D flat to the C, and then I'm going to go down from C to my low B, but if you don't have a low B, you can finish on the next higher B. when I looked at myself in the camera just a moment ago, I thought of that emoji with the flat smiley face. It's not a smile, right? The corners aren't up. The corners are just totally flat across. So that's kind of what we mean when we say don't have a smiley embouchure. Let's practice those whisper tones for a moment. This is where I think of them as almost like fairy sounds. It's a very quiet noise that comes out usually when our airstream hasn't sped up fast enough at the beginning of a note or hasn't slowed down fast enough at the end of a note. So when I was doing our last exercise, I was starting with a who instead of a to. The to articulation helps speed up the airstream, and sometimes I would detect a little bit of this whistle tone. So this probably takes about 10 to 20% of the air that we normally blow to make the flute vibrate and resonate, and it practices finesse in the embouchure. So I'm going to put my fingers on the low D natural and see if I can get out some of these whistle tones. Let's do it for 2 breaths. You may hear some different tones coming out. These follow the harmonic series, so there's multiple ones we might be able to hear. You can try and practice and see if you can isolate them. Let's do that for 1 more breath. Okay, let's go back to this B. And let's practice our chromatic scale a little bit. So let's do 4-note chromatic scale segments, and let's do them 4 times before we go down. So this is another way we can kind of gradually warm up our lower register to the lowest notes. And I'm going to try and incorporate a little bit of a crescendo, an increase in volume as I go lower in the 4-note scale, chromatic scale segment, because the flute tends to sound quieter when we play lower, so we want to compensate for that. So here's what the first one will sound like. So we'll do that 4 times and then go to the next one. C. A lot of right pinky action on that one, huh? I'm going to do the last one for me that goes down to that low B. Now let's go back to this B. And kind of like the first exercise, we'll do 2 notes, and this time we'll make a crescendo and a decrescendo on each of them. But this time, let's make the first note always B, and then make the second note further and further apart. So first it'll be B to B flat, then it'll be to A, then B to A flat, and so on. So see if you can, this is almost like a reverse pull-up, like instead of forcing our way up or muscling our way up to the next note, we would want to kind of relax into the lower note. Now for that last one, the B to D flat, and the next one, the B to C, here's our right hand pinky trick. Normally for the B, our right pinky will be here, but it sounds the same if we put our pinky here, which is where it will be for the low D flat. So when I'm playing that higher B, I go ahead and pre-position my pinky and then just close the rest of my fingers. So let's do the B to C, and then I'll do B to low B. And if you don't have the low B, you can just play a nice long single B. Let's go back up to this B and start working our B major scale. Now, B major has 5 sharps in it. Let's name them. They always are added or subtracted in the same order. F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. So let's start creating the scale, adding one note at a time. Let's do pairs of 4 like we were doing a little moment ago. So B, C sharp, B, C sharp, B, C sharp, B, C sharp, B, B, C sharp, D sharp, C sharp, B. Do that 4 times. Now, as the scale gets bigger, it's going to become a breathing challenge. How can you sneak in a breath and keep the scale going in relatively the same rhythm? So how about we articulate each note? Ta, ta, ta. And see if you can incorporate some change in volume or dynamics. The music should always be going somewhere dynamic-wise. Now up to G sharp. Now up to A sharp. Now the whole octave, B to B, Now let's take a minute to work our vibrato with intention. So let's start on this B. And let's do these 4 pairs. Super slow and tall, super small and fast, and then slow to fast, and then fast to slow. So here comes super slow and big vibrato. Now super small and fast as possible. Now let's do as slow as possible to as fast as possible. Now fast to slow. Now let's try those same 4 on the higher B. Super slow. Now super fast. Now slow to fast. Now fast to slow. Now let's finish with a little bit of B major arpeggio. So the notes in the B major arpeggio are B, D sharp, and F sharp. Then we repeat again at the P, at the B, not the P. So let's start on that high-ish B we were on, and let's add 1 on the bottom side and go back, and then add more on the bottom side until we get all the way down to that low D sharp. I'm going to practice this with double tonguing with the articulation. Da ga da ga da. Some people like a firmer articulation. Ta ka ta ka ta. So we'll do F B B G F sharp B G. Oh, this is the higher one. let's finish with a flutter tongue on that high B, just for fun. All right. Thanks for warming up with me for another session of the Atomic Flutist. Here's a reminder. Every month I do an introductions contest in the Flutarian school. The link is down below. And this month's contest is the funniest flute face. So watch your recordings, and when you see a freeze frame where you're making a funny flute face, take a picture of it and share it in the comments. And this whoever gets the most likes from the community wins a free private lesson or duet session with me. So thanks for tuning in. If you're on school right now, I'll join you in the conversation there. And YouTubers, bye. See you tomorrow.